The famous dense Indian jungle felt alive with sounds from the different animals that call it home. The birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, and the occasional call of a distant monkey filled the jungle with the kind of noise that one would expect to find in any forest. But beneath this serene surface, a great danger existed in the shadows. The tall trees and thick underbrush concealed some of the world's most fearsome predators, including the Bengal tiger, the ruler of this jungle. Near this wild expanse, a small village bordered the jungle. It was a place where the people lived in harmony with nature, but they were always aware of the dangers that lay just beyond the safety of their homes. Stories of tigers exploring the village at night to hunt livestock were common, but few dared to speak about what might happen if one of these majestic creatures ever turned its sights on a human. But not speaking about it does not mean that it will prevent it from happening. Let's dive deeper. It was a warm afternoon when Sunita Patel, a woman in her mid-30s, went on her usual trip into the jungle. She had done this many times before, heading into the forest to collect firewood and forage for herbs. This being the sole source of income, her family relied on her trips for their survival. But why her? Well, Sunita knew the jungle well. She always stayed within the boundaries that the villagers deemed safe, never venturing too deep into the tiger's domain. But that was no ordinary day. It felt different. The air was thicker, and the sounds of the jungle were more muted. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, as if waiting for some dangerous animal to pass. Although her instincts warned her of lurking danger, Sunita, like most days, pushed these thoughts aside and focused on her task. She carried a basket on her back and a long stick in her hand, using it to knock down low-hanging branches as she moved through the thick undergrowth. How else would they survive? Something off was going on. As she made her way deeper into the jungle, the trees seemed to close in around her, their shadows stretching long across the forest floor. It was as if something was watching her. Sunita felt a slight chill despite the warm sun overhead, an uneasy feeling growing in the pit of her stomach. Her instincts sensed a strange presence, but there was still firewood to gather. For this reason, she pressed on. While collecting more firewood, Sunita unknowingly crossed a boundary that all the villagers knew about. It was not a type of boundary that one would see just by looking at it. Maybe the villagers judged how far they would go, purely based on instincts. This boundary was invisible to Sunita, but all too real to the tiger that called this part of the jungle home. The big cat had been watching her for some time, its amber eyes following her every move as she unknowingly stepped into its hunting grounds. And yes, Sunita's instincts were right. Something was following her, and they could sense it. Suddenly, the jungle grew silent. The birds stopped their calls, and the only sound was the soft crunch of Sunita's feet on the forest floor. She paused, sensing the unnatural quiet in the forest, and her heart began to race. Scared, she glanced around, eyes scanning the thick brush for any sign of movement. But how could her eyes notice a stealthy predator who had been watching her for quite some time? But the tiger was there, hidden, watching and waiting. Sunita took a few more cautious steps forward, gripping her stick tightly. Then it happened. In a flash of orange and black, the tiger appeared as if it was too close from the beginning. It burst from the undergrowth with a roar that shook the trees. Before Sunita could react, its massive body slammed into her with the force of a truck. She screamed as she was knocked to the ground, the air leaving her lungs in a painful gasp. The weight of the tiger pinned her down, its sharp claws digging into her back, sniffing her to see if she was a threat. Its hot breath washed over her neck. The fear was paralyzing, a kind of terror she had never known before. She could feel the sharp points of the tiger's teeth rubbing against her skin, its growl vibrating through her bones. Sunita was face to face with death, a painful and truly bad way to go. This was not how she expected her day to go, but something in her snapped. She couldn't give up, and if she had to go down, not like this. With the adrenaline pumping through her body and her survival instincts kicking in, she gathered all the strength she could muster. Sunita reached for her stick, which had fallen just out of reach when the big cat predator attacked her. Surprised by this, the tiger got distracted for a minute. Seeing its prey behaving as it did, it was a little confused. It loosened its grip just enough for Sunita to roll to the side. Grabbing the stick in one swift motion, with a desperate scream, she started swinging the stick as hard as she could, aiming for the tiger's face. The swing of the stick landed on the tiger with a solid thud, striking the beast across the snout and causing it a lot of pain. The tiger stopped for a minute after being surprised by the blow. It growled in anger, but the momentary shock gave Sunita the precious few seconds she needed to run and get out of the predator's nest. After being wounded by the claws of the tiger and bruised by its sharp teeth, Sunita got up to her feet and started running as fast as her shaky legs could take her. At this point, flight mode adrenaline was surging through her body, and she didn't want to even look back. She couldn't, and even if she tried, her mind would not allow her. Sunita's only thought was to get away, to put as much distance between herself and the tiger as possible. But the tiger wasn't done. It dashed and ran after her, its powerful legs and stride propelling it forward with terrifying predatory speed. Seeing this, Sunita ran as fast as she could through the trees, breathing heavily in ragged gasps, her legs burning as she pushed herself harder than she ever had before. The tiger was close. Its fast speed was getting it too close. Sunita could hear its heavy paws pounding the ground behind her, heavily feeling its presence closing in with every step it made. Then, just as Sunita thought she couldn't run any farther, she spotted something up ahead, a small cluster of trees that grew in such a way that their roots had created a narrow space beneath them. Without thinking, she made a desperate dive toward the trees, squeezing herself into the gap just as the tiger reached her. The beast's claws scraped against the roots. It tried to reach her, but it went short of a few inches from Sunita's face, but it couldn't reach her. Frustrated by not getting its meal, the tiger moved around the trees, growling and snapping at the air. Sunita lay perfectly still, but she could hear her heart pounding in her ears, praying that the tiger would eventually give up and move away. For what felt like many hours, the tiger circled the trees, waiting. Its golden eyes never leave Sunita's hiding spot. It sniffed the air, growled low in its throat, but it couldn't get to her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the tiger got tired, let out a huff, and slunk back into the jungle, disappearing into the shadows as silently as it had appeared. Sunita waited, barely daring to breathe, until she was sure the tiger was gone. Then, slowly and painfully, she crawled out from beneath the trees. Her entire body was in pain, her clothes torn and bloodied from the attack, but she was alive. That's something. Staggering to her feet, Sunita began the long, painful walk back to the village, her legs shaking with every step. The journey felt endless, but she knew she had to keep moving. She had to get home. When she finally came out of the jungle and into the safety of the village, the sight of her bloodied form scared the hell out and sent a wave of panic through the villagers. They rushed to her side, calling for help, but all Sunita could do was collapse to the ground, her body giving in to exhaustion. It's like her mind had registered that it was safe and that her body had used up all of its remaining energy to get her from the near-death experience. As she lay there, the last thing she remembered before slipping into unconsciousness was the sight of the tiger's eyes, the cold, unblinking eyes that had stared death into her soul. Sunita had survived the jungle, but she knew she would never forget the day she came face to face with the king of the Indian forest. Yet, that's not the only time a tiger attacked a human in the dense forests of India. In early July 2024, the Indian jungle was thick with greenery, the air heavy with humidity as the afternoon sun blazed above. Deep within this lush wilderness, 32-year-old Meera Banerjee was making her way along a well-known path that cut through the forest. Like most women from her village, she often ventured into the jungle to gather firewood, dig out roots, and collect herbs. The forest was a part of their lives, a source of sustenance, yet it was never without its dangers that lurked within. As she walked, her basket balanced on her hip, Meera hummed softly to herself. She had made this trip countless times before, and though the forest was teeming with wildlife, she felt safe enough during the day. The tigers that roamed these lands rarely came near people during daylight. They were creatures of the night, or so she thought. What she expected to be a good day, as she had done this before, something felt different. As she ventured deeper, the familiar sounds seemed to fade, replaced by a weird silence. Meera paused, her instincts suddenly on high alert. The jungle was never this quiet, and if it ever got that quiet, then something was horribly wrong. She glanced around, scanning the dense brush and tall trees, but saw nothing. Still, a prickle of fear ran down her spine. Her mother had always warned her that when the jungle went silent, it meant a predator was nearby. Could this be one of those days that a predator was hunting during the day? Trying to shake off her unease, Meera continued forward, but her steps were slower now, more cautious. Her eyes looked from side to side, every shadow in the underbrush seeming to shift and move. Then she saw it, a flicker of orange and black stripes in the distance, barely visible through the trees. It was a fully grown tiger. It was crouched low in the grass, watching her with unblinking eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Meera's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. She knew she had to stay calm, but the sight of the massive beast, so close and so silent, sent waves of terror through her, leaving her trembling. The tiger's golden eyes locked onto her, its body tense, muscles coiled, ready to spring at any moment. Meera knew she had little time. Her mind raced, remembering everything she had ever heard about tigers. "Don't run," she told herself. "Don't run, or it will chase you." This is because if she ran, it would trigger the tiger's predatory instincts and see her as prey, and definitely hunt her down. With all the adrenaline pumping in her body, fear had a way of overriding reason, and despite her best efforts, Meera's legs moved on their own. She turned and bolted, sprinting down the path as fast as she could, her heart hammering in her chest. The underbrush whipped at her arms, and her basket fell to the ground, forgotten in her panic. Behind her, she heard the tiger's low growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of it crashing through the jungle. It was coming after her. Meera's legs burned as she pushed herself to run faster, but she knew it was futile. A tiger could outrun any human with ease. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and the jungle around her became a blur of green and brown as she sprinted for her life. Then, with a terrifying roar, the tiger lunged. Meera felt the weight of the massive cat slams into her back, knocking her to the ground. Pain shot through her as the tiger's claws raked across her shoulder, its hot breath on the back of her neck, sniffing, ready to dig its sharp canine teeth inside. She screamed, struggling to break free, but the tiger was too strong. Its powerful body pinned her down and overpowered her. Just as she thought this was the end, her hands found a broken branch lying nearby. Gripping it tightly, she swung it upward with all the strength she had left, striking the tiger across the left eye. The tiger recoiled in pain due to the sudden blow, and for a moment, its grip loosened as it could not see properly. Meera didn't waste that moment. She scrambled to her feet, blood oozing from the gashes on her back and shoulder, and ran again. But this time, she didn't run blindly. She knew there was a tree nearby, a tall one with low-hanging branches that she could climb. She spotted it ahead, and, using what little strength she had left, leaped toward the trunk, grabbing the nearest branch and pulling herself up. The tiger reached the base of the tree just as Meera hoisted herself out of reach. It circled the tree, growling and swiping at the trunk, but it couldn't follow her. Meera clung to the branch, shaking with fear and exhaustion, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. Below her, the tiger continued to circle, its eyes, at least one full, never leaving her. It paced back and forth for what felt like hours, occasionally letting out low, menacing growls, as if taunting her to get down. Finally, as dusk began to settle over the jungle, the tiger seemed to lose interest. With one last snarl, it turned and disappeared into the undergrowth, melting back into the jungle's shadows. Meera remained in the tree long after the tiger had gone, too terrified to move. When she finally climbed down, her body trembling and weak, she made her way back to the village, her mind still reeling from the close encounter. By the time she arrived, the villagers were already out looking for her, worried about her prolonged absence. When they saw her torn clothes and bloodied shoulder, they rushed to her side, shocked and relieved that she had survived an attack by the king of the jungle. For the rest of their lives, Meera and Sunita would carry the scars from those unfortunate days, both on their body and in their memories. The tigers had barely let them live, but they had left a lasting reminder of the danger that lurks in the wild places of the world, where humans are not the rulers, but the intruders.